In this video, I'm making an adapter that'll let me use a retro remote on modern devices. We can control Netflix, we can browse YouTube, we can even type, but it's a terrible, terrible experience. So let's make this thing for some reason. Now to do this, we're going to need a plan, so let's pop out a piece of paper and get scribbling. We'll start with a fantastic drawing of the remote, and then we know we're going to need some sort of sensor to receive signals from the remote. Those signals are going to be read by a microcontroller, and then that microcontroller is going to, through the fattest USB cable ever drawn, connect back to the desktop, and then that desktop will display things on a screen. Now you're probably sitting there thinking, Abe, this already exists. You can go on Amazon and buy an IR receiver for like $10, and that's true. Also, you're welcome. I made you very handsome in this on-screen representation. I didn't have to do that. But I have my reasons. Reason 1, it's educational. Reason 2, reinventing the wheel is not always bad. Have you seen the original wheels? They were bad. If you took one of those, you put on a McLaren, you put on a race car, that thing is not making it around the first turn. Sometimes we have to iterate to do something cooler, and I think we will do something cooler here than, off-the-shelf IR receivers. But, you can be the judge of that. Anyway, for the remote, I just went on eBay and found one stylistically that I liked, and you can do the same thing. Since almost every remote communicates via infrared, you have a lot of options. That leads into a good question. Why do so many remotes communicate in this same way? Well, to figure that out, we need to go look at the history of television remote controls. The first company to realize people were lazy and that they didn't want to get up off of their couches was a company called Zenith in 1950. They modeled their remote after the type of remotes people had been using for radios, which was just wires connected to a couple of switches. This worked fine, but there was a big wire and it looked like a grenade, which was unnerving. That remote, called the Lazy Bones, started the dominoes falling. After that, Zenith continued their great naming with the Flashmatic, which was basically just a flashlight, but you could shine it at the corners of your television to do different commands. By 1956, again with the weird names, they came up with the Space Command. This was the first remote which didn't require a line of sight or a wire. It used ultrasonic, in quotes, silent sound to send signals to a microphone on the TV. The problem is that sound was not silent to everybody, so it was friggin' annoying. These worked okay if you only had a few buttons that you were pressing, but by the 80s we had things like teletext, which required numbers to be entered, not to mention stereos and VCRs and things like this that required complicated inputs. In the late 70s, infrared remotes were being prototyped, and by the mid-80s they were the dominant technology for remote controls. And that has stayed true to today. If you buy a new TV, in all likelihood it has an IR remote, just like the ones I have here. Simple IR communication is not that hard to understand. If we look at the end of the remote through a camera, we can see as I press a button, it just flashes a pattern. Now we can't see that in real life because our eyes can't see infrared light, but the receiver on the other end can. Here's an IR sensor, and it's probably kind of familiar looking if you've ever looked up close at a VHS player, a DVD player, a TV that has an IR port, because it all has this same black plastic. This plastic looks black because it's blocking visible light so that only infrared light can get to the sensor on the inside. To actually connect this to a device we want to use, we need a microcontroller that can sit between the sensor and the device we're controlling. I'm going to use a small Seeed Studio Xiao RP2040, but any microcontroller you might have laying around will work just fine. Now, USB can be used for a lot of different things, but we're specifically interested in the Human Interface Device standard, and that is a way of doing input, interfacing a human to a computer. If you have a keyboard or a mouse or a gamepad hooked up to your computer via USB, it is a human interface device. Small microcontrollers like the RP2040 are really great at pretending to be USB human interface devices. So the code we're going to write will just take the sensor input from that IR sensor, interpret it into signals that a human interface device would send, and there you go. It should work on most devices. In theory, we'll have to build it to find out, so let's do that. This is the bag I've been using to store all the parts for this build, and you'll notice it's mostly 3D printed parts, and that's because 3D printing is a pain. It's more of an art than a science. To arrive at a final case that I liked, I measured the pieces, and then I took that in, and step by step, I built up a little shell for this project. First I made a little box, but it was wobbly, so then I added a little shelf inside the little box, and then it was stable. Then I remembered that there's a NeoPixel and RGB LED on this board, and I was like, hey, we should use that. So I then went back and added a hole. And I just went back and forth iterating on this for an afternoon until I got to a little case which is going to fit this project perfectly. This little Among Us looking case is made of 3 parts. On the back there's a little trapdoor which just slides in. That has enough friction that it doesn't need screws or anything. Then inside there's a little cradle that holds the Seeed Studio Xiao, and then that all goes in this cover that covers it. Also, sound off in the comments if you know why my 3D printer sometimes has these gaps on the top layer. I don't know why it's doing that. The IR sensor sits right in the middle and goes through this cutout. However, before we can do that, this board has these pin headers already soldered on. We don't need those, so I'm going to pop out my new soldering thingy and unsolder them. My new soldering thingy is this thing called an OmniFixo, which is just a little tiny board with little pinchers that's nice for holding things. To remove headers, all you got to do is pull off the plastic bit, and then we can go by one and desolder the pins. Nice. Thumbs up. Nice. 2 thumbs up. Anytime I'm intentionally unsoldering things, I like to check the board afterwards to make sure I did not intentionally unsolder something. And this time we didn't break anything, so that's a 3-thumb moment if I have ever seen one. Everything fits snug in the case, and I can plug it into the USB port and we can see a little bit of a preview of that NeoPixel flashing for us. Getting the sensor connected is going to be a little bit tricky. If we look at the data sheet, the pins are almost lined up with what's on the Xiao, but the ground and the power pin are swapped. So I'm going to need to bend those so that they overlap. I'll start by just soldering the data pin. That one lines up like perfect. I had to tweak how far in I'd soldered it a couple of times because I needed it to be like pretty snug wrapped around the case. I was kind of stuck on how to insulate the 2 pins from the sensor that need to overlap, and I eventually had a genius idea, which is I can just take a bit of wire, pull out all the strands that are inside of it, and then squeeze that insulated tubing over one of the pins, and then when I cross them over, they won't touch. I should be able to just button up the case at this point. However, the sensor ended up being positioned just a little bit wrong, which means I need to reprint the top, and my 3D printer is at home, which means we're going on a walk. Open this jar. Hello.
Thank you for opening the jar.
Boy, I gotta do it in one try so I look cool.
Oh, okay.
Alright, one. Easy, first try. Enjoy the sauerkraut.
Okay, thank you.
And with that, we have a new cover that fits perfect. Now I can just put my parts in there, close the sliding door, and now we can move on and call the hardware done. The software is going to be the big differentiator here. We're going to put in features which normal off-the-shelf IR hardware solutions don't have. If we take a look at the remote, you'll notice all these buttons, the labels for them correlate to things that my computer could actually do. And these operations are all what are called consumer control operations. So like volume up, volume down, things you would find on a normal remote. And that'll be the first mode of operation. All the buttons do what they say, except the number buttons, I'm going to switch around so they act more like a directional pad so you can browse menus and select things. To know what mode we're in, we'll change the color of that RGB LED. So when it's green, we're in this consumer control mode. The second mode is going to be T9 mode or keyboard mode. So each number correlates to a set of letters and pressing it repeatedly will cycle through that letter. And the other buttons are other text-based operations. And you'll know you're in this mode when the LED is shown as blue. And then the final mode is gamepad mode where we map, again, that directional pad to the numbers, but it'll use different signals. And then the other buttons are all like normal gamepad ABXY. And we'll be in this mode when the LED is red. Now, the big question here is how do we switch between these modes? And I've decided to reserve the channel up and channel down buttons to switch back and forth between these, and you'll be able to see based on the LED which one you're in. In theory, some subset of these 3 should work on the vast majority of devices, and then we'll be able to control as many things in my life as possible with this adapter. If you're the type of person who is more comfortable on the hardware side than the software side, then today's sponsor is going to be a great fit for you, and that's Brilliant.org. Brilliant is an online platform for learning math, data, and computer science, and it's one of the best resources I've found for getting up to speed on fundamentals of computer science specifically. Their incremental gamified lessons start where you're at. You do a quiz when you sign up, and then they build on wherever you're currently at, to the point where you get to complex topics like AI. Personally, I failed algebra in high school, and then I went to business school where I never needed to actually do math. Brilliant fits into my very busy schedule, and the few minutes a day I spend with that are catching up on that education I missed or didn't really take seriously at the time. Brilliant has a ton of free content, and they're adding more every week, but if you do decide to jump to the paid plan, then you can use my referral link, brilliant.org/Abe, and that'll get you 20% off your year-long subscription if you're one of the first 200 people to use that link. Check it out, it helps support the channel, but more importantly, it helps support your brain. Anyway, back to the show. Earlier in the video, we talked about how these devices use pulses to send signals, and the only thing that differentiates one button press from another is the duration and pattern of those on or off sequences. So to make a button do something, we press the button once, look at what the pattern is, and then copy that into our code and write down what button we pressed. And then we repeat that for every button on the remote. Now these patterns vary just a little bit, so we have to fuzz the matching, but once we compare them and they're close enough, we can know what button is pressed, and then we can hand it off to the mode handler, which is the T9, the gamepad, whatever. Those have their own mapping of button to handlers, so the T9 has a list of letters that each button represents. Then those just send the human interface device signals down the pipe. I'll link to the full tutorials on reading IR and doing human interface device stuff in CircuitPython in the description if you want to read that. But let's see this all in action.